The sleek, modern kitchen of our suburban home was filled with the acrid smell of burnt plastic. I stood there, staring at the charred remains of my passport, the blue cover now a blackened, shriveled husk. The edges crumbled like ash, and the last wisps of smoke curled up from the marble island. My wife, Victoria, sat just a few feet away, casually sipping her green smoothie. Her manicured fingers scrolled through her phone, as if she hadn't just set fire to my identity. She didn't even look up when she spoke, her voice dripping with that smug tone I'd grown to hate. "You don't need it," she said, smirking like it was some clever joke. "Stay home and take care of the kids. That's what poor husbands do. I'm going to relax." Relax, that's what she called it. She was jetting off to Santorini tomorrow with Noah, her lover. She thought I didn't know, thought I was too dumb, too buried in my work to notice the late-night texts, the girls' trips, the way she'd started dressing up for errands. But I knew. I'd known for months what she didn't know, what I hadn't told a soul yet, was that I had just signed the deal of my life. My startup, the little project I'd poured 15 years into, had sold to an international conglomerate for $2 billion. Billion with a capital B, cash in my pocket, freedom in my hands, and she had no clue. I'd kept it quiet, even from her, because I wanted to surprise her with a new life. Maybe that villa in Italy we talked about years ago, back when she still looked at me like I mattered. But now I saw the truth. She didn't deserve the surprise. She didn't deserve me. I didn't say a word as she finished her smoothie and sauntered upstairs, humming like she'd won some grand victory. I waited until the house was still, the kids tucked into their beds, their soft breathing filling the silence. Then I moved. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, stuffed it with clothes, my laptop, a few essentials. I opened the safe in my office, the one she didn't know the code to, and pulled out stacks of cash, some documents, a spare key fob for the car I bought last year and never told her about. I didn't need much. I wasn't running away in a panic. This was calculated. This was me taking back control. Before I left, I walked back to the kitchen. The passport's ashes were still there, a dark smear on the marble. I grabbed a pen and a notepad from the drawer, scribbled a quick message: "You're right, I'll stay home. Enjoy your trip." I left it next to the ashes, knowing she'd see it in the morning. She'd think it was surrender. She'd laugh, maybe text Noah about how pathetic I was. Letter. I locked the door behind me, got into my car, a black SUV she'd never cared to notice, and drove into the night. The city lights blurred past me as I headed downtown, my mind racing but calm. I wasn't the broken man she thought she'd left behind. I was something else now, something she'd never see coming. The penthouse suite I checked into was a world away from our suburban mansion. Glass walls, a view of the skyline, silence that felt like power. I dropped my bag, poured a glass of whiskey from the mini bar, and sat on the leather couch staring out at the city. My phone buzzed. Probably Victoria, but I didn't check. Not yet. I needed this moment to breathe, to feel the weight of what I'd done. $2 billion, a burned passport, a wife who thought she'd outsmarted me. The kids were safe with the nanny for now. I'd figure that out tomorrow. Tonight was about me reclaiming my life. I leaned back, sipping the whiskey, letting the burn in my throat match the fire in my chest. She thought she'd trapped me, grounded me, turned me into her little stay-at-home puppet while she danced off with her lover. But she'd misjudged me badly. I wasn't staying home. I wasn't poor, and I sure as hell wasn't done. Tomorrow, she'd wake up to an empty house and a rude awakening. I'd left her something she couldn't ignore, not just the note, but the first hint of the storm I was about to unleash. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new penthouse suite, the city sprawling out below me like a map of possibilities. The leather couch creaked as I sat up, my neck stiff from sleeping in an awkward position, but my mind was sharp. I'd left the house last night, walked away from Victoria and her smug little game, and now I was free. The duffel bag sat in the corner, a reminder of how little I'd needed to take with me. My phone buzzed on the glass coffee table, minus 10 missed calls, a dozen texts, all from her. I didn't read them yet. I knew what they'd say, confusion at first, then anger, then some half-baked excuse. She'd woken up to an empty bed, a missing husband, and that note next to the ashes of my passport. Good, let her stew, I thought. I showered, letting the hot water wash away the last traces of our old life. Then I dressed in a crisp shirt and jeans, clothes she'd never picked out for me. My first call was to Juno, my lawyer. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm and professional, like always. "You're up early," she said. "Everything okay?" I told her everything. Victoria burning my passport, her trip to Santorini with Noah, the way she'd mocked me like I was some broke loser. Then I dropped the bombshell. I sold the startup, $2 billion. Signed yesterday. There was a pause, then a low whistle. Well, damn, Juno said. Congratulations. And what do you want to do about her? I smiled, staring out at the skyline. Lock her out. Everything. Joint accounts, cards, access. I want it frozen by noon. Next, I called Theo, my business partner and the only guy who'd stuck with me through the lean years. He'd been in the room when I signed the deal, grinning like a kid on Christmas. You're a genius, he'd said then, and now when I told him I'd left Victoria, he laughed. About time. What's the plan? I told him I needed to meet some people, start putting pieces in place. He offered to handle the press if it leaked about the sale, keep my name quiet for now. I agreed. Discretion was my weapon. By midday, Juno texted done. Accounts frozen. She's got nothing but what's in her purse. I pictured Victoria in Santorini, swiping her card for a cocktail and getting that polite decline from the waiter. She'd call me then, furious, demanding answers. I wouldn't pick up. I poured myself a coffee from the machine, strong and black, and sat at the desk, pulling my laptop open, planning my next move. The penthouse was paid for in cash, $2 million up front, no mortgage, no trail back to me. Yet, I'd used a shell company, something Theo had set up years ago for tax purposes. Victoria wouldn't find me here. She didn't even know I had the money to afford a place like this. To her, I was still the guy scraping by, the poor husband she'd sneered at. I needed allies now, people who could help me turn this mess into something I controlled. My first stop was Isla, Noah's fiancée. She didn't know her man was halfway to Greece with my wife, probably sipping wine and laughing about how they'd pulled one over on us. I found her number through a mutual friend, called, and asked to meet. It's urgent, I said. She sounded wary but agreed. Coffee shop downtown, 1 hour. I grabbed my keys and headed out. Isla was waiting at a corner table, her blonde hair pulled back, her face tight with stress. She didn't know me well, just as Victoria's husband, the quiet guy who didn't say much at parties. I sat down, ordered a coffee, and got straight to it. Noah is cheating on you with Victoria. They're in Santorini right now. Her eyes went wide, then hard. You're lying, she said, but her voice shook. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because we can help each other. She burned my passport to keep me stuck while they ran off. But I'm not stuck. I've got resources now, more than they know, and I'm going to use them. Isla looked up, her jaw tight. What do you mean? I told her about the sale, the money, the power I had now. They think they've won. They have it. I just need proof, something to bury them. She nodded slowly, then pulled out her own phone. I've got his cloud password. Let me check something. We sat there, sipping coffee as she scrolled through Noah's backup folder, her fingers frozen. Oh my God, she muttered, turning the screen to me. Texts. Dozens of them. Noah and Victoria plotting how they'd drain our accounts, how they'd frame me as the bad guy, how they'd live big while I took the fall. He said you were broke. Isla read aloud. He's clueless, Noah had written. Thinks he's still got a shot at something big. Wait till we cash out. Victoria's reply, he's too busy playing dad, won't even notice till it's gone. They'd been planning this for months, siphoning money, setting me up to look like a failure while they ran off to live their fantasy. The joke was on them. I wasn't broke, I wasn't clueless, and I sure as hell wasn't done. Isla handed me the phone. Take it, use it, I want him to pay. I copied the texts, sent them to Juno with a note, start building the case. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. Victoria thought she'd torched my life when she burned that passport, but all she'd done was light the fuse. I thanked Isla, promised to keep her in the loop, and left the coffee shop with a fire in my gut. The penthouse waited, my new command center. I wasn't hiding anymore, I was hunting. With the penthouse as my command center, I began to strategize my next moves. The city sprawled out before me, a landscape of possibilities and challenges. I had reclaimed my life, but now it was time to secure it and expose the deceit that had threatened to consume me. My first order of business was to ensure that Victoria couldn't access any of our joint accounts. Juno had frozen them, but I needed to make sure there were no loopholes. I called her again, this time to discuss the legalities of locking Victoria out of our shared assets permanently. Juno, I need to make sure Victoria can't access anything, I said, my voice steady and determined. What are our next steps? Juno, ever the professional, laid out the plan. We need to change all the passwords and security questions on every account. I'll draft a legal notice informing her that she no longer has access to these funds. We'll also need to update the beneficiaries on your insurance policies and investments. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Let's do it. I want this done as soon as possible. Next, I turned my attention to the house. It was a symbol of the life Victoria and I had built together, but it was also a cage, a reminder of the control she had tried to exert over me. I couldn't let her return to it, not after everything she had done. I called Juno again, this time to discuss transferring the deed to a limited liability company, LLC, that I controlled. I want the house transferred to an LLC, I told her. Victoria can't set foot in it again. Juno understood the urgency. I'll get the paperwork started. We'll need to file it with the county, but it should be straightforward. She won't be able to contest it without a legal battle, and she doesn't have the funds for that. With the financial and legal aspects under control, I turned my attention to gathering evidence. I needed proof of Victoria's infidelity and her plans to drain our accounts. Isla had provided me with access to Noah's cloud, and I spent hours poring over the texts and emails they had exchanged. The more I read, the angrier I became. They had been meticulous in their planning, but they had also been careless, leaving a trail of evidence that would be their undoing. I copied every incriminating message and sent them to Juno. Use these to build the case, I told her. I want Victoria to face the consequences of her actions. Juno assured me that she would use the evidence to build an airtight case. We'll nail her, Ethan. She won't be able to worm her way out of this. As the day wore on, I found myself thinking about the kids. They were innocent in all of this, and I needed to make sure they were taken care of. I called the nanny, asking her to keep them occupied and away from the house for the next few days. I didn't want them to witness any of the fallout that was sure to come. With the kids taken care of, I turned my attention back to the battle at hand. I needed to hit Victoria where it hurt the most, her public image. She had built a carefully curated life on social media, portraying herself as the perfect wife and mother. I knew that exposing her true nature would be the ultimate blow. I reached out to Ara, a journalist I had met years ago. She had always been fair and thorough in her reporting, and I trusted her to handle this story with the sensitivity it deserved. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from prying eyes and ears. Ara, I have a story for you, I said, pushing a folder across the table. It's about a woman who thought she could have it all: money, power, control. But she underestimated the man she tried to destroy. Ara listened intently as I laid out the details of Victoria's betrayal. She took notes, asked questions, and assured me that she would handle the story with care. This is big, Ethan, she said. It's going to make waves. I nodded. That's what I'm counting on. As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The wheels were in motion, and Victoria's world was about to come crashing down around her. But I knew that this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come, and I needed to be prepared for whatever she threw my way. Back at the penthouse, I poured myself a whiskey and sat down on the couch, staring out at the city lights. I had come a long way from the man who had stood in the kitchen, staring at the ashes of his passport. I was no longer the broken husband Victoria had tried to control. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was just getting started. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Juno kept me updated on the legal proceedings, assuring me that everything was going according to plan. The house was successfully transferred to the LLC, and Victoria was locked out of all our joint accounts. She had tried to contest it, but Juno had shut her down at every turn. Meanwhile, Ara's article was gaining traction. She had published it under an anonymous source, but the details were clear enough that anyone who knew Victoria would recognize the story. The comments on her social media posts were turning, with people questioning her perfect image and wondering if there was more to the story. I watched as Victoria's world began to unravel, taking satisfaction in the knowledge that I had played a part in her downfall. But I knew that this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come, and I needed to be prepared for whatever she threw my way. I spent hours strategizing, planning my next moves, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. I knew that Victoria wouldn't go down without a fight, and I needed to be ready for whatever she had in store. But I was no longer the man she had tried to control. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was just getting started. With my plan in motion, I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation with Victoria. I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight, and I was prepared for whatever she might throw my way. The penthouse had become my fortress, a place where I could strategize and execute my plans without interruption. The article Ara had written was gaining momentum, and Victoria's social media presence was crumbling. People were starting to see through her carefully curated facade, and the comments on her posts were becoming increasingly hostile. I watched as her followers began to dwindle, her influence waning with each passing day. Meanwhile, Juno was working tirelessly to build the legal case against Victoria. She had gathered a mountain of evidence, including the texts and emails from Noah's cloud account, as well as footage from the security cameras I had installed in our home. The footage showed Victoria sneaking Noah into the house, rifling through my desk, and even burning my passport. It was damning evidence that would be crucial in the upcoming legal battle. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself growing more confident in my newfound freedom. I was no longer the man who had stood silently by while Victoria controlled every aspect of my life. I was taking charge, reclaiming my identity, and building a future that was truly my own. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the evidence Juno had compiled, my phone buzzed with a message from Isla. She had found more incriminating texts between Victoria and Noah, detailing their plans to drain our accounts and frame her for their actions. I forwarded the messages to Juno, knowing that they would only strengthen our case. Isla and I had formed an unlikely alliance, bonded by our shared experiences of betrayal and deceit. She was a fierce ally, determined to see justice served, and I admired her strength and resilience. We spoke regularly, updating each other on our progress and offering support when needed. As the legal case against Victoria began to take shape, I turned my attention to the kids. They were still with the nanny, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. I knew I needed to see them, to explain what was happening in a way that wouldn't poison them against their mother. I arranged to meet them at a park near the nanny's house, a neutral location where we could talk openly and honestly. The day of our meeting arrived, and I found myself nervous but excited to see the kids. As I approached the park, I saw them playing on the swings, their laughter filling the air. I called out to them, and they ran to me, their faces lighting up with joy. "Daddy," they exclaimed, wrapping their arms around me. I hugged them tightly, feeling a wave of love and protectiveness wash over me. We spent the afternoon playing and talking, their innocence and enthusiasm a welcome reprieve from the chaos of the past few weeks. I explained that Mommy and I were going through some changes, but that everything would be okay. They listened intently, asking questions and sharing their own thoughts and feelings. I assured them that they were loved, and that I would always be there for them, no matter what. As the sun began to set, I said goodbye to the kids, promising to see them again soon. I left the park feeling a sense of purpose and determination. I was fighting for more than just myself. I was fighting for them, for their future, and for the life I wanted to build with them. Back at the penthouse, I poured myself a whiskey and sat down on the couch, staring out at the city lights. I had come a long way from the man who had stood in the kitchen, staring at the ashes of his passport. I was no longer the broken husband Victoria had tried to control. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was just getting started. The next few days were a flurry of activity as Juno and I prepared for the upcoming legal battle. We spent hours poring over documents, reviewing evidence, and strategizing our next moves. I knew that Victoria would try to paint me as the villain, the one who had destroyed our family and left her with nothing. But I was ready for her lies, ready to expose the truth and see justice served. As the day of the confrontation approached, I found myself growing more and more confident in my abilities. I was no longer the man who had stood silently by while Victoria controlled every aspect of my life. I was taking charge, reclaiming my identity, and building a future that was truly my own. The day finally arrived, and I found myself standing in the conference room of Juno's law firm, facing Victoria and her lawyer. She looked tired and defeated, a far cry from the confident and composed woman I had once known. I stood tall and proud, ready to face whatever she threw my way. Juno presented our case, laying out the evidence we had gathered against Victoria. She detailed the texts and emails between Victoria and Noah, the footage from the security cameras, and the financial records that showed their attempts to drain our accounts. Victoria's lawyer tried to refute the evidence, but it was clear that they were fighting a losing battle. As the meeting came to a close, I looked Victoria in the eye, seeing the defeat and resignation in her gaze. I knew that this was just the beginning of the end for her, that the legal battle was far from over. But I also knew that I had won the first round, that I had exposed her lies and seen justice served. Leaving the conference room, I felt a sense of satisfaction and relief. I had faced my greatest fear, confronted the woman who had tried to destroy me, and come out on top. I was no longer the broken husband Victoria had tried to control. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was just getting started. With the legal battle underway, I turned my attention to building a foundation in my mother's name. I had always wanted to honor her memory, to create something lasting and meaningful in her honor. With the sale of my startup, I finally had the means to make that dream a reality. I reached out to Marcus, a nonprofit consultant who had come highly recommended. We met at his office downtown, where we discussed my vision for the foundation and the steps needed to bring it to life. Marcus was enthusiastic and supportive, offering guidance and expertise as we navigated the complexities of setting up a nonprofit. Together, we drafted the necessary paperwork, filed for tax-exempt status, and began the process of securing funding. I was determined to make the foundation a success, to create opportunities for underprivileged children and honor my mother's legacy. As the foundation began to take shape, I found myself reflecting on my journey and the lessons I had learned along the way. I had faced my greatest fears, confronted the woman who had tried to destroy me, and come out stronger and more resilient than ever before. I had reclaimed my identity, built a future that was truly my own, and honored the memory of the woman who had inspired me to be the man I am today. With the foundation up and running, I turned my attention to the future. I was determined to build a life that was meaningful and fulfilling, to create opportunities for myself and others, and to never again be controlled or manipulated by anyone. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was just getting started. With the legal battle in full swing and the foundation established, I turned my focus toward rebuilding my life and creating a brighter future for myself and my children. The penthouse, once a symbol of my escape, had become a sanctuary where I could plan and reflect. I began spending more time with the kids, taking them on adventures and creating lasting memories. We visited museums, explored parks, and even took a trip to Florence, fulfilling a long-held dream. Their laughter and joy were a constant reminder of why I was fighting so hard. I was determined to give them a life filled with love, stability, and endless opportunities. Meanwhile, I continued to work with Marcus on the foundation. We secured additional funding and launched several initiatives, including coding camps and scholarship programs for underprivileged children. Seeing the impact of our work was incredibly fulfilling, and I knew that my mother would be proud. As the foundation grew, I found myself drawn to the idea of creating something new, something that reflected my values and experiences. I began developing a platform called Vero, designed to promote authenticity and truth in a world often clouded by deceit. Vero was more than just a business venture, it was a personal mission to foster genuine connections and honest communication. I attended a tech conference in Lisbon to unveil Vero to the world. Standing on stage, I shared my vision with a room full of coders, investors, and dreamers. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and I knew that Vero had the potential to make a real difference. During the conference, I met Noah, an artist and entrepreneur who shared my passion for truth and authenticity. Our conversations were charged with potential and excitement, and I found myself considering the possibility of a new romantic connection. Noah was a stark contrast to Victoria, embodying the values of honesty and integrity that I held dear. With Vero gaining traction and the foundation thriving, I looked to the future with hope and determination. I had reclaimed my identity, built a life that was truly my own, and found a sense of purpose that went beyond myself. The journey had been challenging, but the rewards were immeasurable. As I stood in the penthouse, looking out at the city lights, I reflected on the incredible transformation I had undergone. I was no longer the man who had stood in the kitchen, staring at the ashes of his passport. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was just getting started. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.